Compassion changes everything. It's more than a value, it's a practice that reshapes how we live, transforms culture, and defines the legacy we leave. Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas. I'm your host, Will Rucker. Over the years, I've had the honor of walking alongside leaders, changemakers, and everyday people who are transforming their communities and sharing some of the most inspiring stories of what compassion makes possible. This podcast is where those lessons and stories become practical tools for your own journey. Each episode offering insights and powerful conversations to help you start with heart, live with clarity, and lead with compassion. Think of this as your community. You're not just a listener, you're part of a movement. Together, we're learning, practicing, and leading with compassion. And that makes the kind of difference that truly matters. With that, let's dive into this episode.
You're tuned in to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast, where compassion inspires action. Together, we're building a world centered in understanding, empathy, and courageous action, starting right here in the heart of Southern Nevada. We're taking the principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you to heart. Now, let's welcome a man committed to fostering compassion in every corner of our city, a beacon of compassion in Las Vegas, your host, Will Rucker.
I'm Will Rucker, and I want to thank you for joining us again for what is turning out to be an absolutely incredible season. This is an opportunity for us to dive deep into the work of compassion, recognizing that it's beyond the feeling. It's actually a skill that we can develop, that we can hone, that we can build. So today's guest is going to share his journey into public service and the things that matter most to him. And he is none other than Gabriel Cornejo. And I am so excited to have you on the podcast, Gabriel. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Great job with the last name. I know it's not the easiest to pronounce, but stuck that landing. So thank you for having me.
Well, hey, I want to start with the question I ask everybody, which is simply, what does compassion mean to you?
Man, just compassion means caring for others, right? And typically it comes in a couple of different forms. Either you've gone through an experience yourself, or you can recognize what is happening to others subjectively doesn't feel right. And being able to recognize that moment and take actions to try to remedy that, I think is the other aspect of compassion. Okay, recognizing what is the feeling, but then what do you do about it?
I think you gave us a textbook definition there, because it is absolutely recognizing the suffering of others and then being moved with compassion to alleviate that suffering. So that warm-hearted feeling. I really appreciate your perspective on that and just leading with caring for others. So you are in the middle of a major undertaking, something that is life-changing. It is I would say probably it takes over your entire life while you're doing that. And that is, you are running for public office. I'm curious as to what inspired you to give of yourself in this way.
So I want to make sure that there's full context for your audience as well. So this isn't my first run, so this doesn't feel like it's a major undertaking, because I will give you the backstory, the origin story, if you will, about what I've been doing since a near fatal car accident in 2011. But yes, I'm running for Congress, but last election cycle, I ran for president of the United States. In fact, I was on 8 states ballots. I ran entirely across the country trying to get on other ballots. I got 72,000 votes, which is the same number as Vivek Ramaswamy, but I did it with just $1,000, where he spent $42 million.
Wow.
This is where the question of why would I do such a thing, right? Because as I alluded to, I was in a near fatal car accident in 2011. I was in a rollover and convertible. I was life flighted to the hospital, fractured my skull, suffered brain damage, broke my hand, injured my back, all these injuries that are still with me today. But more importantly, what I recognize with this brush with my own mortality is that, one, we're not promised tomorrow, but also truly what is important. It's time with your loved ones in your community. So ever since that car accident and through my recovery process, I've been working on things that are geared to create conditions for people to find fulfillment and time with their community. And so that's at the crux of what compelled me to get into this race and the previous race, is because I think we're at a point in our nation's history where the pursuit of happiness is being taken from us by those at the top. And in doing so, I think that the compassion thing and caring for others is to try to combat that, not only with my actions, but also going into these. I use this statement: you have to go into the darkness in order to lead people out of it. So with those that are at the top that are continuing to take more and more of our time, our wealth, and now our neighbors, somebody has to go and engage with them and understand these people are deprived of happiness, which is why they are continually seeking more and more. Because if they were truly happy, and if they truly recognized that fulfillment isn't the pursuit of this amorphous thing called wealth, it's actually the time that you have with your community and the joy that comes with that, then perhaps with that and legislation, we can effectuate change for people to have more time with each other.
Oh, Gabriel, you highlight so many important things in that statement. I want to go back to the car accident piece and the revelation that what really matters is spending time with those you care about. What I am seeing is that it's becoming increasingly difficult for folks to care because there are so many different things happening at one time. There are so many things vying for our attention. And the fact that mere survival gets harder each and every day kind of detracts from that natural instinct to care about those outside of ourselves. How do you maintain your capacity to care?
Sure. Well, let me give an analogy for everybody so that way we all have a sense of where my framework derives from. So I look at America as if we were on a giant ship together, right? And because the water is either coming through holes that were drilled into the hull of the ship, or we're headed towards an iceberg, people are starting to get into a state of desperation survival mode. So they're in that type of scenario, everybody's just looking out for themselves. And that's kind of the culture that's been permitted by those at the top. So in this moment, knowing that this is just people's basic instincts is a state of survival, I know that human beings, we are capable of more. We just need the right leadership in order to create the conditions for us to reveal that. And if people are just keeping their heads above water at this point, I can't expect anything other than them trying to meet their basic instincts. And this is where knowing and truly knowing that they're just on the other side of that is the possibility of a more prosperous experience for us all.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm curious because that basic instinct of survival, there's this common phrase, the survival of the fittest, and that's actually kind of misunderstood about what the real idea behind it was. Because what we found is the reason that we as Homo sapiens survived is because we were able to collaborate and work in groups better than our quote unquote competition. Can you share your perspective on that? How do we effectively build collaboration and the networks that are required for collective thriving?
Yeah. So I'm a guy that likes to make sure that we have common understanding. And so often I use pop culture references. So I'm going to use another one that was introduced to me by a friend. And it's this card game called The Game. Okay. And the premise of the card game is that up to 5 players, either you all win or none of you win. Now,
wait a minute now. That is I'm excited about this. So it's called The Game.
The Game. The Game.
I am putting that on my to-buy list now.
Absolutely. And the thing that I love about it is based on your generation, it reveals the stereotypical characteristics of your generation. And so let me expand on that. I have played with millennials, I've played with younger generations. We inherently have more of a collaborative nature to our experiences because we've experienced a lot of pain as our baseline. Okay. But when you have generations before us, X, boomers, right? They're more competitive in nature. So each time we play this game, and I'll just use a couple of examples of my mom and her generation, and every time they get involved, they want to know, yeah, but how do I win? And I have to reiterate, no, this game is we either all win or none of us win. And it's kind of like you see the computations going through and not really comprehending that. And it's okay. But this is just like one of those realizations that it has been part of the culture of these generations, and the premise has always been do better than your parents did. Right now, as we're seeing, especially with Gen Z, because millennials were in our later part of our era, that they are
Thanks for reminding me of
recognizing.
that.
Well, I'm an elder millennial, so I'm
Yeah.
this is part of the experience, right? But when I'm out here talking to especially college students, laying out the foundation that I'm not fighting for my generation and my parents' generation. Your generation and your future is in question right now. And they understand that vividly. And because of the nature of something like this tool, for us to be able to now reach each other across distances, it has opened up our eyes and understanding that this is a collective experience. But you're seeing in real time, because the house is on fire, you're going to see who's running into the burning building to get people out of it. You're seeing people throw water onto the fire. You're seeing people treat others with the smoke inhalation that they have been exposed to. All of these things are forcing it upon us, whether we like it or not. And so a lot of times it comes with strife, but that strife is giving us a sense of we need each other. And that's the type of communication that I have been fighting and presenting to the top 1% is I know that you think that you're absent from this community as a whole because you're collecting all this stuff, but let me tell you the consequences and how your reality is also going to be impacted by this, because I have compassion and love for everyone, including those that at this moment are taking more than they need and taking more because it's not a sense of happiness is deprived, but also it may feel like a game to them, that there are very real consequences. So it is from that place of love and compassion that compels me. And you're seeing that happen across communities as well, is that collective coming together.
So, Gabriel, I want to make sure I'm hearing this right. So, from your perspective, the way to be able to build that capacity for collaboration is really creating that awareness of we'll call it the facts of life, to do another pop reference. Is that about right?
Well, I'm saying that the circumstances that are happening right now are building it anyways, right? Because it's out of necessity. Now, what we can do for those of us that recognize and have this type of mentality is we can foster and cultivate those communities with our example, with saying, okay, we're at a place where we are seeing the intentions of those that are representing us and the intentions of our leaders who we thought were on the right path. We're now finding out that it's nothing more than lip service, right? So the reality is those of us that actually are doing the work with the right messaging as well are coming to the forefront. But it starts with the example, because I think actions speak louder than words. And that's at the core of things that I've been doing ever since this car accident.
And so, Gabriel, I mentioned before we started recording that I've been in your shoes, not to the platform that you're on, but the same endeavor. And to be frank, it changed my perspectives and paradigm on so many things about leadership, but particularly leaderships in public service and my ability to compromise. One of the challenges that I think we face is most folks will never really recognize the complexity of a community. I bring this down to just the family level. You're planning a family reunion, and one group of the family wants to have pizza with pepperoni. The other group is vegetarian and thinks you should have salad. And you got to come together and plan a meal for 10 people. And that can make your hair turn gray. So then now to expand that to an entire neighborhood, then an entire community, then an entire state and an entire nation, those nuances change you as an individual. And then the idea that, well, I'm at least better than the alternative, and so I'm going to compromise in these spaces, give up some of these principles that I held so tightly. What would you say is the right balance of compromise versus, I'm trying to formulate this the right way, balancing the idea of I need to stay in position in order to make a change with I need to hold on to the position that got me into the position? I hope that makes a little sense.
Oh, I think that you're talking about deciphering whether or not you being in a position to affect change, are you willing to make the compromise uh, despite the base that wants a specific type of change, and how that compromise with others that may not agree with that perspective also want to be addressed and having those
Yeah,
certain.
yeah.
Okay, so here's the way I look at it, and so because I've lived in 11 cities across 2 countries, I've been white collar, blue collar, I've been no colored. But one of the things that I like to impress upon folks is I gained a specific wisdom when I lived in Canada because I went up there with my American exceptionalisms, and they don't prescribe to that. So I intimately got to experience what is Plato's allegory of the cave. A modern day version of this is called The Matrix, the movie The Matrix. Okay. We do not know that we're born into a cave until we get exposed to contrast, until we get more information. In that pursuit, in that experience of living in Canada, I had been faced with challenges to my perspective, my reality, and my place in that reality. And in those moments, the chemical imbalance that happens is a fight or flight mechanism. And because I went through that early on in my life, I have now seen what is taking place in real time whenever you engage with people that may not share the same perspective. Because ultimately, if you challenge people in a very specific way, more combative way, there's a lower opportunity to get common understanding. So when you approach folks, regardless of what side of the perspective they're sharing, keeping in mind that in order for a common understanding to occur, it has to be separate from emotion and just dancing with each other in a very nuanced way. Nuance is the word of the day for the millennials. Pee Wee Herman, right? For those that remember that. But in this particular case, nuance is actually compassion, right? Because nuance is saying you're giving credence to somebody's perspective enough to not be so friction based with your perspective, with your argument, with your delivery of your argument. So the best thing to do if you really want to effectuate change and do it for that compassionate heart of yours is to try to understand the other person, and not just what they're saying, but get to the core or the crux of what is driving that. And often we get a lot of things in politics that are called wedge issues. So like immigration as an example. These things are just fear at the core of what these wedge issues are predicated on. If you can get through that noise because you have the patience and you recognize what's taking place, you can then cultivate a culture that is also operating in the same way. So that way we can actually get to a place where there is real compromise, but both parties understand, or all parties understand, why everybody shares the perspective that they do.
I love that. Like all of that's what I guess we don't tweet anymore, but whatever the thing that people are doing, I guess we thread nowadays. But that was so powerful. And I think you hit the core of compassion there, which is the common humanity. Because at least my belief is that we all fundamentally want the same thing. It's just how we get there may be envisioned a different way. And I have a friend that very prominent in our city, who recently traveled outside of the country. And when he came back, we were having a conversation, talking about American exceptionalism. We were on a golf course. We were having a conversation. And he was like, yeah, I went to this particular country. And wow, it really wasn't that bad. And he was like blown away by this, because he had only experienced our country, and he believed us to be the greatest nation on the planet, which there are many great things about us, and please don't hear me say anything different than that. But every nation I have visited has had something great about it. And so I don't think there is a greatest. I think that we are all great in unique ways and have different challenges, but also have different advantages. And I think the more exposure people have, the more we're better able to recognize where people are coming from and what they're hoping to achieve and why they see things in the way they do. I also think that we've experienced the collective trauma that has reduced our compassion that has reduced our capacity as well to have the insight into others' perspectives, because we've been harmed, we've been hurt. And I have a 4-month old. I'm doing all the parenting things and learning about development and all of that in real time. And what I'm recognizing is a lot of the parenting advice that we have taken for gospel truth has actually created some deficits in the actual brain itself and reduced the size of the compassion center in the brain because of how we've reared children. Then add on top of that social media, add on top of that once in a generation events that happen every 5 years. Like all of that create an environment and of people that we haven't experienced before. So some of these norms and some of these universal truths aren't so universal anymore and aren't so normative. I say all of that to say, I really appreciate the fact that you're coming to this with a lens of lived experience that is wider than your neighborhood, that is wider than the district that you would be representing, that is wider than this nation. Because I think that that type of insight is invaluable in creating change. Last thing I'll say on that is you don't know what you don't know. And so many of us have this huge kind of blinder of not knowing we don't know what we don't know. And so I'm curious as to how you'll approach ego, for sure. Yeah. But how will you approach, whether you win or lose? Like, I mean, I think that there's winning and losing, right? But how will you approach affecting change with those that do have a smaller scope of perspective than yourself?
Yeah. So if you can imagine when I had that experience in Canada, going through and reflecting on the fight or flight that was happening in real time, right? And then when I was out of that perceived confrontation, reflecting back on what was being communicated, I then gleaned some understanding about why it was being presented the way it was. But here we are, where we've got a lot of people that may not have the coach around them, the culture around them, or the know-how to navigate what's taking place, right? So this is where the allegory of the cave comes into play, is not everybody knows they're in a cave. It's just like not everybody knows they're in the matrix, right? But if you do, you don't, I don't want to put this on anybody, you do not have a responsibility, but you do have an advantage of trying to convert people into understanding that they're in a cave to lead them out of it. That's why I use that statement. You have to go into the darkness in order to lead people out of it. But one of the things that I also like to reference is Socrates has given us a path of how to try to get people to grow in their understanding, not with assertion, but by asking questions, right? Because in that process, you're going to get them to come to their own conclusions based on their responses. Now, ultimately, in that, though, can be a lot of frustration if you're not well crafted with your questions, to the point that you may have to start over again, or you may have to learn from how you've approached somebody in this subject. But I find that through asking questions and talking through the logic to get a clear understanding from the other person's perspective is helpful. But it also, in real time for both of us, we're gaining understanding, because maybe there's blind spots or gaps in my knowledge that I'm going to also then learn in the moment by conversing with somebody else who shares a different perspective. Because I do know that I don't know it all. And I have walked a mile in a lot of people's shoes, but I haven't walked in everybody's. So I do find that asking questions not only serves me in the ability to grow my own understanding, but also in the possibility of getting somebody else to understand themselves and their perspective in the process.
Often in leadership, the people that are following the leader want certainty. They want security. How do you approach when you do make a mistake, when you are wronged? How do you still rise to the level of leadership while also saying, hey, maybe I don't know this, or hey, I made a mistake? Or do you? Do you acknowledge that?
No. So just for contrast, right? We're in the era under the Trump administration where we are talking about doubling down. Everything's double down. Never admit you're wrong, right? I think that's absolutely the incorrect approach for leadership, because it is strength in order to recognize that you did something wrong and to be able to articulate that. But in doing so, some people will perceive that as weakness, but that's actually not the case. But in doing so, you're also demonstrating that you are vulnerable, which is opening up yourself for others to then recognize you as a person too. You're giving permission for that. And that's very important, because that's what's missing, especially in our culture, is because people are in this state of survival, the certainty is lacking. Therefore, the self-preservation instincts are kicking in. But as you started out with, we have seen throughout civilization and history, we're better together than we are apart.
Oh, fantastic. Last few minutes together, just a couple quick questions. First thing that comes to your mind, just one word, one sentence, that kind of thing.
Cool.
And so just finish my statement. What the world needs now,
More love.
love is.
Connection.
The greatest asset I bring.
Patience.
My biggest success.
To be seen. I would say that if I can give some context to this, because I know not everybody knows who I am. We've touched on a few different things that I've done in my life. I'm very proud of things like I helped the American Red Cross found a whole new division during Hurricane Harvey called the Latino Engagement Team. I built a nonprofit version of DoorDash during the pandemic. I shaved my head when I was 5 years old for another classmate, along with 12 other of my classmates and my teacher, because we knew that our classmate was diagnosed with cancer and was going to lose his hair with the chemotherapy. These things all derive from a place of love. And the greatest love and pursuit that I'm working on right now is getting us to a place in a nation and a civilization across the globe where we start to recognize that we are better together, and having the conditions to find fulfillment is where I will feel like that will be the greatest thing that I've accomplished.
You cheated a little, but I'll give it a
did.
pass.
Thanks.
I've hoped because.
I hope that this period that we're going through changes rapidly, because on the other side, I think it's more broad prosperity, and prosperity to me is time with your loved ones.
Last one. Compassion is.
Love.
Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us on Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm going to give you the closing words. What would you like to leave with our audience today?
As you know, we've got a lot of things that are happening in our community, a lot of fear, a lot of friction, but we are working through it together. And you're seeing in real time the compassion of others is coming to the top, because we have discussed this entire podcast how it is important and how we've been able to do this as a society by working collaboratively. And I hope that you continue to lead with that love, because that is the thing that is going to compel us into the next iteration of what civilization looks like. So stay strong and stay committed to the ideas that your neighbors, your loved ones, are the most important treasure that we have on this time on earth.
Fantastic. We'll leave it there.
This is your host, Will Rucker. Thank you for joining me on Compassionate Las Vegas. Together, we're building a community of compassion, showing that compassion is more than an aspiration. It's a practice that transforms lives, transforms culture, and shapes the legacy we leave. If today's episode inspired you, I'd love for you to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a review and share it with your people. Every time you do, you help this community grow and bring more compassion into our world. Until next time, remember to start with heart and live with clarity, lead with compassion. And as I always remind you, you are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop, and what you do matters. So live compassionately.
Compassionate Las Vegas. This is the moment. This is the call. This is the moment. This is the call. A compassionate city gives hope to us all. Compassionate Las Vegas.